welcome to this webinar on the post-COVID landscape for startups and entrepreneurs. My name is Srinivasan. I'm the editor of the Hindu Business Line, and we're very pleased to have Professor Pillai Rajan of the Indian Institute of Technology here with us today, who's going to talk to us about the kind of challenges that startups and entrepreneurs are likely to face in the months and to come, even assuming that the infection curve gets flattened or reduced to a certain extent and economic activity resumes in some fashion. For startups, this is a time of course, crisis, but it's also a time of opportunity. Particularly for those who are digitally driven. I think the pace of adaptation of any digital technology has changed dramatically due to the lockdown, and this is likely to vastly increase the potential addressable audience for all of them. It's also a challenge because everybody is pivoting digitally at this moment, so the competition will also intensify when traditional brick and mortar companies are pivoting to digital and trying to sort of streamline and drive their operations in a digital fashion. Finance is going to be a major challenge, particularly because of the very difficult businesses are currently experiencing, as well as the uncertainties in relation to the future. To discuss these issues and perhaps suggest I think there is no other better person than Professor Pillai Rajan, who has been leading not only academic but practical development of startups and entrepreneurs in this country. He runs a very successful training program for would-be entrepreneurs. Over to you, Professor Pillai Rajan. Professor Pillai Rajan, over to you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you're quite clear.
All right. Thank you. First of all, I'm going to I've muted all the participants to ensure that the ambient noise that is there may not disturb the webinar that we are doing today. And, it's a great time, to be talking about the landscape for startups and entrepreneurs. And I'd like to first of all thank Business Line and the editor to kind of support this webinar, and also thank the editor to join personally in this webinar to kind of set the context and the tone for what we are going to discuss in the next an hour or so. And as he was just mentioning, this is a challenge for all types of startups and all kinds of business plans. Personally, I have been closely studying the startup sector for a while now, and before studying the startup sector, I have actually been a part of this, the venture capital industry. And what I have seen in the last 50 days, today technically we are in the 50th day of lockdown. What we have seen in the last 50 days is something that it was unimaginable. For example, I was in the venture capital industry in the dot-com period. And when there was a dot-com bust and people felt that that was the biggest crisis the startup and capital industry had experienced. And 20 years from then, today in 2020, the crisis that we are experiencing today is nothing. It's not even close to what we had seen then. It's much, much bigger. But as the editor set the tone in the beginning, whenever opportunity also comes along with the crisis, it comes as a package. And given the fact that we have this COVID virus closely associated with China, so I wanted to kind of lay out this quotation to start with. This is expressed by John F. Kennedy when he said, the Chinese two brushstrokes to write the word crisis, and one brushstroke stands for danger and the other for opportunity. So every crisis has led to a lot of opportunities, and entrepreneurs are those who don't sit and analyze the crisis, but they look at taking the opportunity that comes along with it. Though in a very general sense today, in the society as a whole, there are a lot of issues today. People are going through a lot of inconveniences and so on. So there is an opportunity that actually presented. What I'm going to do now is to start with, let's say, I'm going to say this 3 days, right? 1st April 2020, 5th May 2020, and 7th May 2020. Right? So these are all days that has actually happened in the lockdown period in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And for somebody who has been reading the news, these 3 dates are really enormous importance because that indicated one of the largest private equity investment that has actually happened in this country in a single company. In 21st April, invested 43,574 crores. And in 5th May, Silver Lake invested 5,650 odd crores in Jio. And on 7th May, Vista invests about 11,000. So close to 60,000 crores has been invested in Reliance Jio, and public announcement has happened in the last couple of weeks. Anybody who's familiar with these kinds of investments, we all know very well that the homework would have happened for several months before the investment is actually fructified. So a silver lining here is, despite the fact that we are in a lockdown and when most of the activity has literally come to a standstill, these investors have followed up on the commitment that they would have made before the lockdown to invest in Reliance Jio. So this in a way indicates the potential that many of the investors see in an economy like India. For each and every commitment that that investors stick on to, there are several others who might have, who might not been able to stick to the commitment. But nevertheless, such large commitments to have happened, or to have people have carried on the commitment even during this lockdown period is a phenomenal sense of confidence on the country as a whole. Not only these three, that as papers have reported that there are subsequent investments that are likely to happen. So General Atlantic is likely to invest about 10,000 crores in Jio, and then Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund could take a minority stake as well. Together, this is a company though started in 2007, literally took off in 2011. So in a span of 10 years, today, if you really look at these investment numbers, these numbers indicate a firm valuation of about 4,90,000 crores, right? It's 4,90,000 crores for a company like Jio. And today, yesterday, as we all seen the address of the Prime Minister, so he talked about an economic stimulus of 20 lakh crores. So 20 lakh crores is nothing like 4 Reliance put together combined as per the valuation that we are looking at today. So opportunities has been significant. The growth opportunities has been significant in a country like India. Now, what is it going to happen following this COVID crisis? So that is going to be focus of my talk. And I have looked at addressing these 4 topics. First, I wanted to look at how the contours of the virus and entrepreneurship in a way
how far we are sure about listen we are sure, no? No, that means underdeveloped cortex, but classical and the LS1 அப்படிலாம் இருக்கணும் அப்படின்னா அது வந்து உனக்கு கிளாசிக்கலா சரி.
Okay, I'm sorry about it. I've just muted again. The second point I wanted to really look at what is the medium-term policy imperative. Ultimately, the policy regime plays a very important role in how the startups are going to respond and survive. And point 3, which is going to be the focus of this webinar, is liquidity for early stage startups. I'm going to focus more on early stage startups, mainly because the work that I am doing is primarily concerned with early stage startups. And second, the challenge of liquidity is very high at the early stage. So therefore, given the limited time that we have, I wanted to focus a little bit on the early stage startups. And finally, what is going to be the new normal? Right? Is there a new normal, and what is likely to be the new normal? So these are the 4 key themes that I wanted to cover in this webinar. First, let us go to the first theme. So this is a curve today that all of us are very familiar with. Even if you show it to a child, the child will realize that this is the curve that everybody is talking about today, that traverses how the virus has exploded in different economies. Right? So this is one typical curve. So we have a gestation period followed by a period of exponential growth, and then subsequently we have a period of maturity, right? So then we have what is called as flattening. So the biggest challenge has been, right now, how do we really flatten this the COVID curve? And so many strategies are being talked about. How do you flatten it, and also to a certain extent reverse the growth, or people are talking about degrowth. Now, is this a new curve to us, right? So this is not really a new curve to most of us. For somebody who's been in entrepreneurship, let's say, this is. So this is a curve that we are all very familiar with. So if you really look at it, this curve is also called as the S-shaped curve, right? Depending on who is looking at it, it can be called as the hockey stick curve, or it can be called as a J curve, or more commonly it is also called as the S-shaped curve. For long, as entrepreneurs, we always decided that our venture should follow this S-shaped curve. And so, for example, there is a gestation period, and then there is a period of very strong growth, which is called as the hockey stick growth, and then there is a period of maturity. So this maturity period is where there is consolidation, there is competition, there is a regulatory oversight, there is product obsolescence. There are so many other things which kinds of reduces the growth rate that the stock that the company has been pursuing. So now, for all along as entrepreneurs, when we are trying to pursue, right, this kind of a growth curve, an important part of this growth curve is this inflection point, right? So there is this inflection point, and most of the studies have kind of indicated that only 10% of the businesses that are started are able to successfully cross over this inflection point. So that means they experience this inflection point. The remaining of the business, they don't actually go to the inflection point. They follow more or less a very, very straight kind of a curve. So that means they miss the growth curve that we all see in the hockey stick portion, right? The remaining actually don't have the inflection point. Now, what is really going to happen post-COVID is that the inflection point that we see here, which takes to be about 10% over a period of several years, is unlikely to remain at 10%. Right? This is going to be significantly reduced. So that means the business that traditionally most of the businesses that traditionally which used to go through this hockey stick path are unlikely to successfully cross the inflection point and reach the stage of maturity. So this is the first thing that we all. If we really look at the current situation that we have today, we can look at on two sides of this S-shaped curve. On the left-hand side of the S-shaped curve, we have certain sectors that are really took off. Right? For example, the personal protective equipment, the medical equipment, and then we have sanitizers and related securities. Businesses that are looking at testing kits. Then we have work from home kind of companies which do this video conferencing and all of those. So these kinds of businesses have really taken off and they are really going through the S curve. But on the other side of the S curve, what we have is there are businesses which as rapidly as the businesses on the left have grown, these businesses have dramatically gone down. For example, you have travel, you have hospitality, you have real estate, and then we have grooming, events management, all of them, which traditionally were having a very, very mature. Remember, they did not have significant growth, but they were having all the segments were in the mature and consolidation phase. The rate at which these businesses have gone down, right, almost close to zero in the last few weeks, is the reverse of the S curve, right? They are going down the S curve rather than going up. Now, it is extremely difficult for us to imagine that when things get back to normal, these industries which gone down so rapidly, they'll be able to go back in the same rapid pace. That is very unlikely to happen. It is going to take some time. Therefore, the first effect of COVID, I'm talking about the first effect of COVID is the businesses that reach the inflection point are going to be much lesser. And the second effect is businesses that shrunk dramatically are not going to be in a position to expand in the same dramatic phase. The expansion and the coming back to normal is going to be at a much slower pace. And this is going to be the second effect of COVID. Before I move to the next topic, I thought I will have this short cartoon from Dilbert. Okay, so next, I was sitting and listening to the Prime Minister's address to the nation yesterday. And so the new paradigm that emerges, that is advised, is going to be the paradigm of self-reliant India. So, and he said that there are going to be 5 key components on which this paradigm of self-reliant is going to be based on. So economy, infrastructure, systems, demographics, and demand. And so these are the 5 major elements that he talked about. So now as startups, so when we really look at developing our business plans or looking at our strategy, we cannot isolate ourselves from the dominant policy regime that exists at that point in time. Because ultimately, policies play a very important role in shaping up markets. Policies play a very important role in getting investment. And policy, to a certain extent, also play a very important role in influencing demand. So therefore, if you really look at taking advantage of what is going to be the post-COVID situation, then we will have to look at how our startup is going to be able to align with any of these dominant policy paradigms that we have today. So if we move aside economy and infrastructure, so that is not something that entrepreneurship is traditionally associated with. So we have 3 other segments. So we are talking about systems, we are talking about demographics, and we are talking about demand. Systems, essentially, I would kind of interpret is in terms of technology. So technology, again, is going to be a major theme. Technology, not just in terms of manufacturing, but technology in terms of services as well. And demographics is something that people have talked about. So everybody is aware today that India has the most youthful market in the world globally, the largest youthful population in the world globally. And then we talked about demand. An example of robust demand is also indicative of the large private equity investments that has happened in Jio that I have started at the beginning. So if you really look at these three segments, they are unlikely to be significantly affected by COVID. Right? So India traditionally has been a very strong player in technology, and that emphasis on technology is going to continue. And demographics, if at all anything, the demographics is going to be a lot more favorable for India after the COVID situation. It's unlikely to change overnight. This is an advantage that is going to exist for a long time. And then finally, we have demand. And a large population will necessarily have significant demand. And to be able to sustain the demand, we are also having a large economic stimulus. Right? So one of the largest economic stimulus that India has known was been announced yesterday. So therefore, as startups, we can look at things in a very, very positive fashion. There is going to be demand, there is going to be demographics, and there are going to be emphasis on technology. So now if you move on, traditionally, if you look at economics, we talk about the two production factors, right? Traditionally, it used to be capital and it used to be labor. Today, if you really look at it, the four major pillars that was highlighted yesterday was land, labor, liquidity, and law. So without getting into much detail on these four, let me try and discuss what would this impact startups. So if you really look at land essentially I would mean office space, because ultimately if you look at startups, majority of the startups are in technology space. And in the technology space, land, as in the traditional land, is not something that is so critical, but people are really looking at office space. And given the fact that there is so much of shrinking of demand that is expected because of a large number of people are expected to work from home in the near future, commercial real estate, commercial office space is going to be significantly available for startups. And it is also going to be available at a price point because of reduction in demand. There is going to be a supply in the market. There is going to be excess supply in the market. And because of this excess supply in the market, there is going to be a price movement that will be extremely favorable for the startup founders. So this is again a very, very important. So the cash flow, right, that people would have, for example, the office rental is one of the significant expenses for startup companies at all levels, starting from the incubation cell onwards. Even if you are talking about a shared workspace, where people are talking about rates from 3,500 to 10,000 rupees per month for a seat, cash outflows for rentals and office space is a significant expense. And this is expected to reduce by as much as 25%. And so that is again a significant. Then we have labor. If you really look at manpower, if you really look at talent, if you look at human resources, right? I'm not really looking at the blue skill labor for startups, right? But you're looking at manpower. There are two categories here. So one is we are talking about the young and inexperienced resources that would be available. And we're talking about senior management, middle management and senior management. So the conditions would be extremely favorable for young talent as compared to senior management. See, for example, for a startup to grow, for a startup to mature, there is going to be a lot of demand for senior management. There is also going to be a lot of demand for senior talent. Given the context, given the uncertainty, many senior talent who would have otherwise shifted to working in startups may not prefer to leave their large corporate jobs in the short run. That means the talent acquisition as far as the senior resources are concerned is going to be extremely difficult. And if we need to really get senior talent, we have to really pay a huge premium. On the other hand, if you look at labor as far as the young talent is concerned, that is going to be available in plenty. So the reason is most of the companies are going to delay people joining, or they are also not going to be in a position to honor the offers that they have made. And there are also cases where many of the companies might have to close down, which is going to result a large number of young resources available in the job market. So that's going to be 50-50. So startups will have to somehow take advantage of the favorable situation that exists as far as the entry-level resources are concerned. But at the same time, there is going to be a difficulty as far as getting very experienced talent. Then the third element is liquidity. Liquidity is what you would kind of perceive, I kind of interpret as the investment. And I'm going to talk about the investment in detail in the following slides. So I'm kind of parking it for the time being. And then next we have law. So law is more like an enabling environment. Right? And as we see, many of the state governments are giving a lot more flexibility. They are giving a lot more flexibility for startups to be able to function after the lockdown is going to be taken off, whenever it is going to be. And a lot of measures that are putting in place to ensure that businesses have a lot more favorable policy environment. So as far as land is concerned, it is favorable. As far as law is concerned, it is going to be favorable. As far as resources in terms of talent and human resources concerned, I would think the status quo is more or less going to remain the same. What is really going to happen to liquidity? So most of the entrepreneurs today, as I have also been saying in several other forums, they need capital to start with. Capital is one of the biggest constraints for early stage entrepreneurs, simply because they come from non-business backgrounds. And when people are coming from non-business backgrounds and they don't really have personal capital or capital from their family to invest in the business, there is going to be a need for external capital, and that is where liquidity plays a very important role. So before I move on to liquidity, let me again take a short diversion in terms of this, the Dilbert cartoon. Okay, so let's go to liquidity in detail. Liquidity essentially for early stage startups. When I say liquidity, as I was mentioning earlier, we're talking about the source of capital. Source of capital, external source of capital are going to come from these four sources, right? So you have angel investors.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by Winos Venture Engine. I'm Srishruti Sriram, the head of marketing and partnerships at Winos. So Winos is a technology platform for
So there are four major sources of early stage funding for early stage startups. So So the first would be angel investors, then we have government agencies, and then we have debt. So traditionally, angel investors has been by and large one of the major sources of funding for young entrepreneurs. I mean, in the last couple of years, this segment has really grown quite a bit. Today, we are talking about at least 5,000 angel investors who reasonably are active in the investment circuit. So let me highlight some of the unique aspects of angel investors. The first is they have very broad categories. I mean, they are not very, very specific on which kind of sector or which kind of venture they are going to invest. And that works very favorable for the entrepreneur. If they like the entrepreneur, if they like the idea, then they will make an investment. I mean, when we try and compare it with seed funds or any of the other government agencies, we will be able to get a sense of how advantageous the angel investors are in terms of being very agnostic across categories or across sectors, across stages, and so on. The second is the speed. Right? You can get a decision from angel investors very fast. You can approach them at any time of the year in the sense that they don't really have an investing window for business at any time of the year. And then you have value addition. They also do very actively help the entrepreneurs in terms of their business, in terms of giving them connections, in terms of helping them to find the next round of investors, and so on and so forth. So then we move to seed funds. When we move on to seed funds, the characteristic of seed funds is each of the seed funds, they have a very well defined sector and stage at which they invest. So that means when you have a business idea that does not meet the investment criteria of the particular seed fund, they are unlikely to go ahead and make an investment. So that means the universe of funds any entrepreneur can apply for is dramatically reduced. They can approach only certain seed funds who are available and who are likely to make an investment in their particular startup. The quantum of investment that are being made by seed funds is going to be much higher as compared to angel investors. And they will also be equally involved in adding value to the portfolio companies that they invest. But the most important philosophy that we need to understand about seed funds is they are going to identify the few winners and they are going to back those winners to the hilt. Right? So that is very important. That means they are not going to be very, very dispersed in terms of making investments in a large number of startups, but they are going to be very focused in terms of which of the startups they are going to make an investment in and then go behind this. Then we have government agencies. A very important feature of government agencies is they have well-defined areas for support. Right? They have clearly outlined this is the particular area, this is the particular segment that they're going to support. And if anything that is outside of this, they are not going to. For example, it could be anything. For example, they will say, I am going to support only those startups that are based in a particular state. Or it is going to be, I am going to support startups that are based on startups that are involved in COVID related issues. Or it is going to be startups that are less than 2 years of age. So they are very, very clear, well-defined areas for support. Because as government agencies, they have to ensure probity. Most of the government agencies are also forced to ensure transparency. So that means they will stick to the rules and regulations that are part of the particular support scheme. Government agencies also take a fairly long time. There are exceptions, of course, but then the general rule is that they take a long time. But there is very limited value addition as far as the government agencies are concerned. Right? I mean, they make an investment and then subsequently they may be doing monitoring, but there is very little that you can get in terms of value addition. They are not going to be part of the board of the companies. They are not going to provide any further value addition. But the significant aspect of investment by government agencies is sum for all. Government really looks at assisting as many startups as possible. So they will, ensure that the given resources are shared to a large number of startups, which essentially means that a lot of startups get money, but they don't get adequate capital. They get very, very small amounts of money, which will help them to make a little bit of advancement, but nothing more. And government agencies also look for founders to invest a little bit to get more. So that means in most of the cases, the entrepreneurs will have to make investment upfront, and then they may be able to claim reimbursement at a later stage. Then we go to the debt. So debt essentially is one of the least preferred as far as the early stage startups are concerned, because there are interest outflows. Most of the startups lack collateral, and then there's very, very poor appraisal of risk. What is going to happen to these funding sources following COVID? If I go to the next slide, angel investors are going to see a reduced activity, because many of them who have made investments in the past, they have seen many of the companies have closed shop, they are counting losses in their portfolio. And the risk in the startup segment are going to attract very few new investors. In fact, much of the angel investment is driven by new investors, and if lesser number of new investors are going to come, the angel investment is going to become slower. And most of the angel investors, they also have their regular daytime jobs. They are working as senior level. And as we have seen earlier, there is uncertainty in the job market, and this uncertainty will also affect the investment preferences and their orientation towards investment in startups. And next, if we come to seed funds, the seed funds are also going to look at a downward trend. Most of the LPs are withdrawing their commitments. And more importantly, even if they have funding, even if funds are available, the seed funds are going to delay decision making simply because they want to ensure what are going to be the contours of demand post-COVID. What are the products and services that are going to be used? Unless until the demand is clear, many of the seed funds are going to delay the investment. And we are also going to look at the growth prospects being muted. They may not really have a very strong growth, at least for the next few years, and that is also going to delay seed funds investment. And most of the seed funds are very likely to invest in the next round or augment funding of their existing portfolio companies rather than invest in the new companies. A very positive feature is the support that we can expect from government agencies. Government agencies are going to increase the support in several well-defined areas and in some of the priority sector for the government. And if at all we are going to bank on any funding source, I think the government agencies are something that we are going to look at. And debt is going to have a downward trend simply because there is going to be a pervasive non-performing asset problem. Now, I'm speaking now, I'm also aware that our finance minister has addressed that there are going to be a lot of loans given to MSMEs. So there is going to be a little bit of debt that is possible, but then we are talking about serious debt here, serious debt that can really support growth. That is going to be fairly limited. Okay, I move now to the last section of topic. So post-COVID, the biggest question is, what is going to happen? Are we really going to look at a mean reversion, or is it going to be the new normal? Right? So when I say a mean reversion, all of us expect things will go back to the old. So everybody is talking about there is going to be a U-shaped recovery, or there is going to be a V-shaped recovery, and so on and so forth. So that means the prevailing dogma today is we are going to go back. There is going to be in some delay, but ultimately we will go back to what it was previously. Or is it going to be the new normal? Right? What is the new normal? The new normal is we are not going to go back to what we were previously, but we are going to go to a new kind of a situation. So many people have kind of consistently believed that though as individuals, most of us would want to revert to our old, that means there is going to be a mean reversion. Intuitively, we also believe that we are never going to go back to where we were. That is going to be the new normal. Now, if you're really going to look at the new normal, the following will be the questions. Is there something like a history that we can look at when we had a situation like new normal? So let me take about this dot-com boom. So in the dot-com boom and after the dot-com boom, when that was the situation, the dot-com boom situation really kind of lasted for more than 10 years. So the new normal that set in after dot-com was really new, and it lasted for close to 10 years. So we have a history where the new normal sets in whenever there has been a dramatic shock to the external system, and that is likely going to be the situation even today. So the second is creating versus adjusting. It's not that the new normal is new, but startups have always been involved in creating a new normal. For example, if you really look at ride hailing, the whole concept of ride hailing, Ola, Uber, Rapido, all of them was a new normal in how people travel. But this new normal was created by startups. Today, when people are talking about video conferencing and work from home, that was created by startups. But today, startups will have to be adjusting to the new normal that is being created by the external environment. So that is going to be the biggest change. In whichever field that we may look at, there is an external environment that is creating a new normal, and startups will have to adjust to meeting the requirements of this new normal. The third element is, the question is, what is going to be the new normal, and not will there be a new normal. So will there be a new normal is being addressed. There is going to be a new normal, but the uncertainty is, what is going to be the new normal? What will be the new products and services that is going to be in demand? What will be the quantum of investment that is going to be invested? Right? So that is the question, and that is the uncertainty. And finally, how long will the new normal last? Will it be 6 months? Will it be 1 year? Will it be 2 years? Will it be 3 years? Here, let me take back to what actually happened in dot-com. In dot-com, the new normal lasted for a decade. And when I say new normal, what I meant? The new normal, what I meant is the average investment that happened in a particular startup. The number of investments that actually got a follow-on funding. The valuation at which the investments have happened. So these are the new normal that I looking at as far as the startups are concerned. What are the major trends? There is going to be uncertainty in product markets as well as capital markets, both on the funding as in the product side. The discretionary spending will reduce significantly. For example, people used to spend earlier, that is going to reduce now because of the uncertainty in the job market, because of the uncertainty in the financial market. Mortality rates will increase. When I say mortality rates, I'm talking about startup mortality rates. Failures are going to increase, and the investment duration is going to take longer. If people are able to obtain investment in 4 months, now it could really double. It could take 8 months for somebody to get investment. Much of the external funding resources are going to shrink in size. As I was mentioning, the seed funds and angel investments are going to shrink in size. If you really look at it, these two sources contribute about $1 billion for very early stage ventures. And we can never predict what is this going to be for the next 1 year. So therefore, entrepreneurs will have to really look at new avenues for funding their business, right? Either it could be pre-selling, either it could be partnerships, it could be significant amount of bootstrapping. If you are going to be going after investment, seed funds and angel investors, we are going to really waste a lot of time. And finally, the focus has to be on costs. The major paradigm has been so far to be able to relentlessly push on revenues without really bothering about the costs. So I'm not going to take any examples today, but then many of the unicorns that we have in India are relentlessly pursuing revenues. They are relentlessly pursuing market share. They are relentlessly pursuing top line without adequate attention to the bottom line. And now that is going to significantly change. There is going to be very, very sharp focus on the costs. Investors are going to question those businesses that do not focus on costs. And there are going to be new sunrise sectors that will evolve. As a natural process of evolution, if you really look at again startups, the sectors that come into focus keep changing every 3 years. In the past, there was a boom of e-commerce in 2000, and then we did not see the boom again till about 2015. Right? So the sectors that keep booming keep changing. And what will be the new sunrise sectors? It is going to be healthcare, work from home solutions, personal transport, material science, and so on. So for example, things are going to dramatically change. Today, if you really look at personal transport is something that I'm going to place a big bet on. People who do not have personal transport has been significantly affected because of this lockdown. Even if today there is relaxation in lockdowns, they are not able to be mobile because they do not have personal transport. And people who have been significantly affected, the first thing that they will make an investment in personal transport once things start coming into play. So there are going to be new sunrise sectors that need attention from startups, right? So these are sectors that startups can see significant opportunities in the days that's coming by. What will be the impact for investors, right? Typically, an investor looks at a return of 35% over a 5-year investment horizon, right? I'm talking about a 35% year-on-year return on a 5-year investment horizon. So that means a value of 100 should become 450 in 5 years. So if that happens, the investors could get a return of 35%. In a revised scenario, it may not be possible to reach a 450 in 5 years. It may take 8 years because of the situation that I just mentioned. That means the IRR will not be 35%, IRR becomes 21%. Still not bad, but at this rate, there are several asset classes that are available. So in a sense, what happens is investors are going to find other sources that are attractive and the investment capital could go there. If you really look at it, we talked about how the mortality rates are going to increase and the negative returns are also going to increase. A typical portfolio of a seed stage investor is as follows. 20% of the portfolio is highly successful and the remaining are not so much, and the weighted returns that one would get is about 26%. In post-COVID, what is really likely to happen is the weighted returns are going to dramatically reduce by half, and so that means investors are going to be extremely cautious in investing, and they would want to kind of see how much of this portfolio weight can still give them supernormal returns. What will be the impact for the founder? For this, we looked at the pre-COVID trends of our leading angel investment network. The leading angel investment network, what we found was most of the companies that got angel investment, the ratio of post-revenue and pre-revenue was 86-14. And my belief is that this is going to further tilt towards post-revenue. That means the pre-revenue is not even going to be 14, it's going to be much lesser. Startups needs to have revenues before they can get external capital. So today, even if you look at some of the government funding, they also indicate a certain amount of size to be able to be eligible for government funding. So this is very important. The investment that has been made is about 2.4 crores. And this is going to further reduce. That means the investment that investors are going to invest in startups, is going to further reduce from the existing level of 2.4 crores. So that means entrepreneurs will have to be a lot more cost conscious. Average revenue run rate that is expected today at the time of investment is about 5 crores, and that is going to further increase. So remember, in a country like India, a revenue of 5 crores for a startup is reasonably significant, and it's not easy to achieve. But the investors would expect to reach this size of revenues before they can get investment. And finally, average investment made by the founders before they get investment is about 80 lakhs. That means the personal capital invested by the founders and the family is close to about 80 lakhs. And this is likely to increase. That means investors would expect more skin in the game from the promoters and founders before they make an investment. So in sum, what I would like to highlight here is there are phenomenal opportunities that are going to be available for the startups and the entrepreneurs. But on the other hand, the capital or the liquidity is going to be a big challenge. And startups that are going to significantly overcome this liquidity challenge are going to be the winners. So we talked about 4 major factors of success. We talked about labor, we talked about land, we talked about liquidity, we talked about law. And out of these 4, conditions will be favorable on 3, but liquidity is going to be the biggest challenge. And a startup that is able to successfully address this liquidity challenge more likely to be a winner and harvest the bounty in the years to come. So with this, let me wind my presentation, and I think we can take any questions that we have. Editor sir, so I am done.
Okay, so thank you, Professor Rajan. I have a question actually before we wind up. So the question is that how do you see, the nature of startups changing in the post-COVID scenario? In the sense that pre-COVID, you had a whole bunch of basically, placed in the retail, entertainment, B2C space. Where do you see the new opportunities which startups are likely to look at in a post-COVID scenario?
Okay, so actually that is in your side. So I'll just mute. Okay, so it's a very nice.
Voice is not audible. Professor, sir, you.
Yeah, so I think there was a problem, and now I think we are fine. So the question is, what will be the nature of startups? Okay. So what will be the nature of startups? I find, if you really look at the demographics. So can I request people to not unmute? Can you just mute your so that we can avoid this echo? So in my view, there is going to be significant startups that are going to be in the B2C space, because one of the biggest pillars in the self-reliant India is going to be demand. And when you really look at demand and demographics, we are really talking about the B2C segment. And so that is where I'm going to see a lot of action in the coming days. We can also look at other major trends as far as the startups are concerned. I think there is going to be significant number of startups that are going to be started by people who have significant experience in the corporate sector. And many of the senior members of the corporate, they would think that the conditions are now ripe to be able to get into entrepreneurship because of the newer opportunities that are emerging. And these senior entrepreneurs will be able to get in more personal capital to be able to do the startup. They don't really have to depend on external capital in the initial stages, unlike many early stage startups. Many entrepreneurs who start, they start up very early. I'm also going to see less of activity on the B2B segment, simply because most of the startups are today having phenomenal crisis in terms of payment issues, working capital issues. That's becoming a very, very big challenge. If external capital is going to further reduce and the demands of the working capital is going to be very, very difficult to manage, the whole concept of B2B segment also becomes very unattractive. In terms of sectors, I think healthcare is going to be a major sector that is going to grow in importance in the coming years. If I really look at it, health tech was not at all the top sector in the past, but suddenly overnight, because of the increased emphasis on healthcare or the vulnerability of many of us to health related issues, is going to make this a very, very attractive segment. Now, the biggest feature of the health tech segment is it is going to take a long time. The gestation periods are longer, the investment requirements are longer, and maybe the returns might not be as attractive as any of the technology startups. So, sir, these are the major trends that I would see post-COVID in the startup landscape.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Hello.
Hello. You are able to hear me?
Yes.
Can I have a word with Professor Thilarajan?
Yes, please go ahead.
Professor, you had mentioned opening up of demand in the private transport. Could you please clarify more on this?
Okay, so before I respond, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I would request others to mute. So what I meant was there is a significant amount of difficulties that people who dependent on public transport are facing because of the COVID lockdown effect. And suddenly many are realizing that if they had personal transport, their mobility will be far better. For example, we all realize that earlier there was a lot of debate, and then people attributed that the loss in demand for the four-wheeler sales and two-wheeler sales can be attributed to the riding behavior of the millennials. So that means people don't want to own a vehicle, they want to depend on shared services and so on and so forth. Now, the entire model of that is now put to a very severe stress test, because if you don't have personal transport, it is severely affecting mobility. And this is what I mentioned, that there will be an increased preference for people to go in for personal transport. It could be two-wheeler, it could be four-wheeler, it could be anything that gives them mobility in situations like this.
So, Professor, based on your current input, you are saying that the automotive industry is likely to see a surge, whereas most of the predictors today are saying that automotive industry is going in the southward slide.
Yes, that would be the outcome of our work. So whatever has been predicted is because all of this crisis began. Now, after the crisis, the behavior of the consumers is going to dramatically be altered based on these experience. And businesses that are well prepared, be sensitive to these changes, I think will do well.
But with the current trend of social distancing, do you think this is still something what you're predicting that it will happen? Because if we are, let's say, in a closeted environment like an automobile or very close to each other in a two-wheeler, that is still a threat of danger for the public, correct? And within the social dynamics that we are looking at as a social distancing as one of the key factors for this COVID or post-COVID era, do you think that will also have or is likely to bear upon this observation?
I think it's a very good question. My response is that going by the narrative that we are seeing all around, is we need to somehow to be able to adapt and adjust to the new normal. And at the same time, there has to be economic growth as well. And one of the important drivers of economic growth is mobility. Travel and mobility, they are going to be very, very important drivers of to be able to economic growth. Consumption as well depends a lot on travel. And the social distancing aspect is going to severely affect public transport. Earlier, public transport was being emphasized upon from sustainability perspective, from an environment perspective, and so on. But today, when the major narrative changes to social distancing, the public transport will be less relied upon. So would people would prefer to be in their own personal transport among the people whom they know, or even it could be individual driven. Because the whole concept of social distancing is completely changing the way that people are looking at use of transport.
Sir, can I ask a question, sir? Hello.
Yeah, please go on. Maybe you could.
Will all these assumptions be, go berserk when the vaccines be invented? What will be the scenario when the vaccines are invented suddenly? So will all these analysis, will it be in place?
So that's again a very good question. So the issue is, vaccines going to kind of give a solution, but then the problems, are going to be, people have experienced this problem, people have experienced the vulnerability. So our own understanding is that, this is likely to remain, right? The preference of public transport will be more muted in the coming days, whether vaccine is taken or vaccine is not. Because the question of vaccines, the efficacy of these vaccines, right, that's going to be again. And then people are talking about there are different types of flu vaccines and so on, right? So I'm completely unaware about what are the different types of flu vaccines that one has to take. That's my personal view in terms of the irreversible changes in consumer behavior as a result of the social distancing that people have got used to. I am also getting a couple of questions in the chat window. So there was the question from which field is good for B2B as a startup. For me, it is going to be very difficult for me to be able to give a clear response to this because let us really look at startup as a category. Look at startup as a category. In our research, we have looked at 15 different startup categories, and each of these 15 different categories has several subsectors as well. So we are looking at close to about, at a very, very broad level, 225 different categories in which we see more number of startups being set up. Offhand, I think it's going to be very difficult, for me to say which will be a good field for B2B as a startup going forward, because we have not really done at such a granular level so far. And there's a question, how do you really avail government stimulus? And is it going to be through banks? Well, I think we will all get to know detailed guidelines about how this is going to be. In fact, the FM was doing a press release at 4 o'clock before this webinar started. I have not had a chance to go through the press release in completion, but in the coming days, we can expect the actual guidelines in terms of how this is going to be made available to the industries and the economy. And so we are also reaching a closure. We have already shot beyond the scheduled time of 6 o'clock. So maybe I will take this last question. There is a question from Dheeraj. It says that, what do you think about biotech and telemedicine startups? Would they get a boost or they will remain the same? Anything they should consider? Recently, I happened to be a part of an investment, not an investment committee of a very large incubator supported by a leading institution. So there we were able to look at some of the proposals that came in the health tech kind of a sector. So what generally the prevailing trend was, if there is anything in this health tech segment that we can use today for the current situation, then they should be supported. So I would kind of, let's say, have the same response here as well. So biotech and telemedicine, on its own, it's fine. But then if we are able to kind of pivot it to a certain extent that it can address some of the requirements that is arising from the post-COVID, then they will be a lot more supported. So instead of saying simply telemedicine, if you can say something like a medical technology that promotes social distancing, then that could be, startups that can get a bigger boost. So the resources are scarce. So everybody is now trying to leverage how these resources can be useful for the immediate problems. So if there is any startup that is well positioned to address the immediate problem, then they are likely to get a boost and higher form of support.
Right, Professor, thank you very much. I think we are now 12 minutes past our deadline. So I would bring this discussion to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you, Professor, for a very enlightening presentation. Hope to do more of these in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And let me also thank for all the participants. We will note down the questions and we will reach out to you. We will reach out to you with the answers so that you will be able to get more out of being a part of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.